You lie still. The weight of the day softens around your shoulders, and beneath you, the earth holds steady. But though the soil feels solid and silent, something deeper stirs. Beneath the surface, a breath begins, not the kind you take through your lungs, but an ancient, invisible inhalation of life itself. You are cradled by something more than gravity. You are resting on a living tide, that every handful of soil is a city unseen. There are more organisms in a teaspoon of dirt than humans on Earth. Fungi that whisper between roots, bacteria that chew through the dark, and tiny insects who move like slow currents in a sea of dust. Together they weave a story, a cycle, a rhythm older than memory, and within this hidden symphony plays one especially quiet note. Nitrogen, nitrogen, the gentle builder. It doesn't shout like oxygen or burn like carbon. Instead, it drifts through the soil like a ghost of nourishment. You can't smell it, you can't see it, but everything you are, every muscle, every strand of DNA in your cells is shaped by its steady presence. In the air around you, nitrogen floats freely. It makes up more than 3/4 of the sky, yet in that form it's locked away, untouchable by plants, unusable by animals. It's like a vast treasure buried behind glass. For nitrogen to feed life, it must fall, it must sink, it must change. This change begins below, in the soil's slow breath. You can almost imagine it now, the soft descent of atmospheric nitrogen into the underground cathedral of life. It's here, in this dim chamber of roots and rot, that the story truly begins. Imagine this: beneath a sprout of clover, fine threads of root reach downward like searching fingers. Around them, tiny bacteria nestle into nodules, finding shelter and purpose. These microbes, ancient beyond history, hold a gift. They take the ungraspable nitrogen from the air and fix it into a form the plant can use. A quiet miracle, a transformation in the dark. They do this not with hands or tools, but with enzymes, little molecular chisels that carve nitrogen gas into ammonium, a nutrient that plants can drink. This is nitrogen fixation, and it happens with a gentleness no machine could mimic. One breath at a time, these microbes feed the earth, and in return, the plant offers sugar, born from sunlight and water and care. It's a quiet partnership, roots feeding bacteria, bacteria feeding roots, and through it, nitrogen enters the food chain. From leaf to sheep, from fruit to human, this cycle continues. It touches your dinner plate. It touches the proteins in your blood. You are part of it already now. Breathe with that thought. Slowly, deeply, you are not separate from the soil beneath you. You are made from it, shaped by it, quietly fed by its breath. Your bones and brain carry the story of nitrogen, passed from microscopic hands to chlorophyll to flesh. And yet, the cycle does not stop with you. When leaves fall, when creatures die, when waste returns to the earth, nitrogen circles back. Decomposers, fungi, beetles, bacteria, unwrap the molecules of life like soft presents, and nitrogen is released again, free to begin another loop. This is no straight line. It's a wheel that turns with every season. Spring brings green, thirst, summer swells with growth, autumn sighs in falling color, and winter covers it all in sleep. But below the frost, the cycle continues. The soil never stops breathing. Even now, as you drift closer to sleep, imagine the world beneath you, alive and working. Threads of fungi stretch like lace through the dirt. Bacteria glow with invisible. Labor, roots listen, stretch, and drink. And nitrogen, the quiet alchemist, moves among them, patient, essential, and unseen dots. So much of life happens where eyes do not reach. The most vital processes don't roar, they whisper. They don't hurry, they flow. The nitrogen cycle is not just a pattern in the soil, it is a rhythm in your body. A breath beneath all breathing, and like a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. It continues even while you rest. Let yourself feel that rhythm. Let it hum softly inside you. You are not above the soil, you are part of its music. You rise and fall with its breath, and just as nitrogen falls from the sky into the earth, so too begins a new story, how the sky's invisible threads are caught and woven by life's smallest hands. Above you, the sky stretches wide and endless, soft and pale at dawn, glowing blue by day, blushing at dusk. You breathe it in without thinking, each inhale drawing in more than just air. Hidden in every breath is a quiet presence, nitrogen, so much of it, so silent, so essential, and yet untouched. Nitrogen is the great stillness of the sky, 78% of the atmosphere, floating freely as a pair of tightly bonded atoms, dancing high above the earth. But in this free-floating form, it is locked, inert, like a treasure sealed in glass. The world below needs nitrogen desperately, every leaf, every body, every cell, but cannot grasp it as it is. Something must break the seal. Now imagine that first thread falling, not like rain or lightning, but like a secret dropped gently into soil. That thread is nitrogen, caught and pulled downward by the smallest of hands. Microbes, tiny lives that crack the code of the sky. You cannot see them. They live buried in roots, clinging to rocks, floating in oceans. But they are the first weavers of the nitrogen cycle. You could call them fixers, the ancient alchemists of life. With enzymes like lockpicks, they pry nitrogen open and bind it into new forms. Ammonia, nitrate. Molecules a plant can sip like morning dew. This act, nitrogen fixation, is one of the quietest miracles on earth. Picture a patch of land, untouched and wild. A few clovers push up from the soil, delicate and green. Their roots twist down through darkness, and there, in tiny nodules, bacteria make their home. They take nitrogen gas from the air, that untouchable, invisible abundance, and anchor it to hydrogen, a chemical embrace. Suddenly, what once drifted uselessly in the sky becomes nourishment. The plant grows. Its leaves widen. Its stems thicken, not by magic, but by the quiet labor of bacteria at its roots. In return, the plant offers sugar's energy drawn from sunlight and gifted through its roots. This exchange is ancient, gentle, perfectly balanced. There are others too. Free-living bacteria that roam the soil like nomads. Cyanobacteria in the oceans, floating like the planet's first farmers. Some even drift in rice paddies, fixing nitrogen for grains that will one day fill your bowl. You are fed by their labor, even if you never see their work, and sometimes nature calls on lightning, a rarer hand in the cycle. High above, in a flash that cracks the sky, nitrogen is broken open. Oxygen rushes in. Heat fuses them together into nitrates that fall with rain. It's a more dramatic form of the same story. Nitrogen's journey from air to earth, from dream to substance. But most of the time, this story is quiet. You walk above it daily. You lie down to sleep with it under you. The ground hums with transformation, and you never hear a sound. Consider this. Every protein in your body was once part of the sky. Every strand of DNA inside you holds nitrogen that was, not long ago, drifting silent and unreachable above the clouds. You carry the breath of airborne atoms, not just in your lungs, but in your muscles, your thoughts, your sleep. You are built, in part, from threads pulled from the heavens. This cycle, beginning with fixation, is more than chemistry. It is relationship, air and earth, meeting through life, not rushed, not forced. Just one molecule reaching for another. A story of connection, of transformation, of shared survival. The plants grow stronger, the soil grows richer, and the nitrogen begins to move, threading its way into the roots, then the leaves, then the animals that feed on them, into us, into you, and when you eat, when you breathe, when your body builds and repairs and thinks. It is nitrogen that helps hold your form together. This falling thread becomes you, and, in time, it returns. But for now, it begins here, with microbes spinning gold from sky, with the sky giving up its invisible gifts, with the soil receiving what it cannot make on its own. Let that truth rest with you. You are not separate from the wind above or the dirt below. You are the meeting point, a being held between two worlds, the sky's silence and the soil's whisper. And as nitrogen finds its first foothold in the earth, a deeper question lingers in the dark. What becomes of this gift once life begins to build with it? Close your eyes and feel yourself sink into the quiet beneath the surface, down past the grass, past the pebbles and earthworms, into the deep, shaded web of roots. Down here, the world is dim and hushed, a hidden chamber where time moves slowly and silence speaks in molecules. In this underworld, something marvelous unfolds, not loud, not sudden, but steady. There are no sounds, no machines, no light, just life, invisibly humming, just fixers of the invisible at work. You may not know them by name, but they know you. They serve the planet without ever rising into sight. These are the nitrogen-fixing microbes, the first sculptors of growth. Bacteria so small they vanish even under most lenses, yet their role is monumental. They make life possible where it couldn't otherwise begin. Imagine a bean sprout, delicate and green. Its leaves barely tremble in the breeze, but its roots are busy with conversation. They send out chemical whispers into the soil, calling for partners, and the bacteria respond. They arrive like drifting seeds, guided by scent and need. Where root and microbe meet, a transformation begins. The plant allows them inside, opening tiny nodules like doors. The bacteria nestle in, safe and warm, and begin their ancient task, fixing nitrogen from the air and offering it to the plant in usable form. It's not done with force. There is no violence here. Just enzymes, gentle tools passed down over billions of years that split the nitrogen molecules wide open. In the darkness, nitrogen from the sky is stitched into ammonium, a compound a plant can drink. It's like turning starlight into food in return. The plant offers sugar, carbon shaped by sunlight, ferried down through stems into the roots, and into the waiting microbes. This is no transaction. It's a gift exchanged in silence. The balance is delicate, and both sides honor it. This is the hidden economy of life. Sugar for nitrogen, sunlight for sustenance, light above traded for breath below. An agreement so old it's written into the DNA of legumes and clover, of soybeans and alfalfa. You see the green above, but the true miracle lies in what you cannot see. These fixers live many lives, some attach to roots, some float freely in the soil, doing their work alone. Others drift in wet paddies where rice grows, feeding grains that will fill bowls in quiet kitchens. Some swirl in the ocean's blue belly, giving nitrogen to drifting algae, the base of a marine feast. They work tirelessly. They ask for little, and because of them, the world is lush. Fields grow tall, forests rise, animals feed, and your body, your very body, is built. Because every muscle you move, every strand of hair, every blink of your eye, depends on proteins. And proteins are chains of nitrogen, strung together by instructions written in your DNA. You are, in part, an arrangement of nitrogen, one that began with these invisible workers in the soil. Their work is ancient, before flowering plants, before vertebrates, even before the air held much oxygen. These bacteria were already at work, fixing nitrogen into the first building blocks of life. They made the soil fertile before roots ever touched it. They laid the groundwork for everything that followed. And though we've learned to mimic their magic, creating synthetic fertilizers to feed fields on a massive scale, we have never replaced them, not really, because they do more than fix nitrogen. They listen to the soil. They keep the balance. They understand the language of roots. If you could sit beside a single clump of soil and wait quietly enough, you might feel it, the movement of molecules, the exchange of breath between beings too small to see. You might begin to understand that what we call invisible is only that which we've forgotten how to notice. Even now, as you lie still, their work continues. Beneath cities and forests, beneath your garden and the farthest deserts, these tiny fixers are weaving sky into soil, bringing the unreachable close and anchoring life to the earth. And it all begins in the roots of quiet plants. That is where the invisible is caught, stitched into the body of the world. It is where something too vast for hands becomes small enough for roots to hold. So let yourself drift into that hush. Let your breath slow to match the rhythm of the soil. You are not apart from this story. You are built from it. Your life is written in threads that once floated above the clouds. And as nitrogen becomes part of the leaf, part of the tree, part of you, you might begin to wonder, how does life take this gift and turn it into green, growing form? The morning light is soft, filtered through a canopy of green. You imagine yourself lying beneath a tree, watching leaves shift in slow waves above you. Each one, a living panel of sunlight, turns gently toward the sky, not with haste, but with devotion. Plants do not move quickly, yet they are always reaching, upward into light, downward into shadow. Roots burrow through the soil like curious fingers, and leaves spread like sails on a still sea. What drives this quiet hunger? What gives a tree its shape, a blade of grass its strength, a vine its spiral longing for support? Nitrogen, a gift from the fixers below, now handed upward into the green hands of transformation. Inside each cell of every plant, something miraculous unfolds, not loud, not flashy, but endlessly elegant. Molecules dance in the presence of light, and the cell becomes a tiny engine, taking in carbon from the air, water from the roots, and energy from the sun. With nitrogen as a sculptor's tool, life carves out form and function. These green architects, cells filled with chlorophyll, are builders of breath. They transform raw ingredients into sugar, into starch, into the very fabric of their being. And nitrogen is there at every step, shaping proteins, forming enzymes, holding the structure together like quiet scaffolding. Without it, the whole design would falter. You can picture it if you try. A sunbeam touches a leaf. Inside, chloroplasts, small green chambers, begin their work. They catch the light like nets. They split water. They shape energy, and with nitrogen's help, they make the first sugars, the first fuel, the first step toward something greater. This is photosynthesis, yes, but in this soft light, you don't need the name. You just need the image. Sunlight becoming substance. Invisible rays becoming sweet liquid that flows through veins of xylem and phloem. Carried to the furthest tip of the leaf, the youngest bud, the deepest root. From these sugars, a plant makes cellulose, the strong walls of its cells. It makes chlorophyll, the green pigment that keeps reaching for the sky. It makes the proteins that let it bend toward light and respond to wind. And nitrogen is in all of it, the quiet stitcher at the heart of the pattern. Now think of a forest, or a single blade of grass. Think of a tomato plant curling towards summer, or a sunflower unfolding to the east. All of them, in their reaching and growing, are doing the same work, turning gifts into form, turning air into shape. And always, nitrogen is the quiet breath behind it all. It's easy to forget that this is where life begins, not in movement, but in stillness, not in speech, but in transformation. Plants are not passive, they are alchemists. They build the foundation of the food web. Every animal, every breath you take depends on the sugars and proteins that begin in green. Even you, your energy, every step, every thought is borrowed from the work of these green architects. The sandwich you ate, the fruit on your table, the grain in your bowl, all of it traces back to a leaf and a sunbeam, stitched together with nitrogen's invisible thread. The work is tireless. Day after day, leaves unfold, drink light, and feed the world. And the cycle deepens. When plants grow, they become food. When they fall, they return to the soil. And nitrogen, still quiet, still essential, begins its loop once more. There's something comforting about that, isn't there? The rhythm of it. The way life continues through these small, unnoticed acts. A leaf drinks the sun. A root absorbs nitrogen. A cell spins sugar from air. And you, too, are nourished by these threads. Sometimes the greatest transformations happen slowly, patiently, in places no eye can follow, but their effects ripple outward into forests, into food, into your very breath. And yet, these transformations are not isolated. The nitrogen that enters the leaf becomes part of something larger. It travels, it feeds, it fuels. The story doesn't end in green, because where green builds, something must consume. And in the next chapter of this silent dance, nitrogen flows again, this time into the mouths and muscles of those who feed on leaves. All things, even the greenest and brightest, eventually return to rest. A leaf falls from a branch and drifts slowly to the forest floor. It doesn't resist. It simply lets go, carried on a quiet current of wind. A blade of grass withers in winter. A petal folds. A fruit bruises and softens and sinks into the earth. This too is part of life, the letting go, the falling back. You are used to beginnings, the sprout pushing upward, the flower opening, the growth that seems to rise endlessly toward the sun. But here, in the soft hush of what comes after, another kind of miracle happens. Waste is not an end. It is an offering. In this part of the cycle, there is no applause, no visible transformation. But the work is just as vital. Nitrogen, taken up by leaves and bodies, now begins its return. The circle gently folds inward. Picture an animal resting beneath a tree. It eats the fruit, grazes the grass, chews the stems. Nitrogen flows from plant to muscle, from leaf to blood. But what is not used, what is left behind, becomes part of the cycle again. Urine, manure, the scattered pieces of what remains, all of it returns to soil, not as trash, but as tribute. And when life itself ends, as it always must, the body is not lost. It is gathered by the earth, broken down with care, molecule by molecule. Fungi begin their slow song. Bacteria arrive in their multitudes. Insects, worms, and silent scavengers join the dance. Each plays a part in releasing nitrogen back into the world. There is no violence here, no rush, just decomposition, a word that sounds harsh but holds deep grace. It is the earth's form of remembering, a way to gently return borrowed elements, to separate the threads, to make space for what comes next. Your own body, too, follows this pattern. One day, like all living things, it will yield to the soil, muscles, organs, skin, all of it unwoven, returned, not in grief, but in gratitude, because what you are has always been part of something larger. You are not simply a being, you are a temporary arrangement of nitrogen, carbon, water, and memory, woven for a while into a single form, only to be rewoven again. And when nitrogen leaves your body, it does not vanish. It re-enters the soil, where new fixes wait. Some of it may feed the roots of a tree, some may drift into a pond, nourishing algae. Some may begin the long climb back into the sky. There is beauty in that, in knowing that nothing is wasted, not even waste itself. The forest depends on fallen things. The garden thrives on what came before. And even decay is a kind of nourishment. Compost piles, rich with kitchen scraps and yard trimmings, become warm with life. The scent is earthy, never sharp. It is the smell of transformation, of change made visible in slow time. Within that mixture, bacteria work as quietly as they did in the roots this time, not fixing nitrogen from the air, but releasing it from what has already lived. They do this with purpose. Ammonification, nitrification, mineralization, names you don't need to memorize, only feel. They are steps in the unraveling, steps in the surrender, and each one sends nitrogen forward toward its next beginning. Even in cities where waste flows in pipes and drains, nitrogen continues its quiet journey. Sewage, runoff, decay, the cycle does not break. It only finds new channels. Human lives, too, participate in the return, whether through soil or storm drain, farm or forest. You may not see it. You may not feel it. But your every day is touched by this cycle, the quiet weaving and unweaving of nitrogen as it makes its way from life, through waste, into life again. Let that truth rest beside you now. You are never apart from the soil, never far from the rhythm. Every exhale, every step, every meal carries you deeper into the loop. Nothing is lost. Nothing is wasted. Even what falls becomes the ground for something new. And just as nitrogen returns in this silent surrender, there are others, tiny, tireless, who will carry it further still, guiding it into forms more useful, more mobile, more ready for the next route that reach. The cycle of life is not built in leaps, but in careful steps, and in the hush between death and new growth, something essential happens, not dramatic, not visible, but constant, reliable. It is the work of the middle alchemists, tiny beings that turn what once was into what may yet become. You lie here, still and quiet, while deep beneath your resting body, the soil is busy. Nitrogen, once fixed by microbes, taken up by plants, cycled through waste, is now being reshaped again. But this part of the journey is subtle, hidden, held by bacteria that do not call attention to themselves. These are the nitrifiers. They are not the first to touch nitrogen, nor the last. But their role is no less sacred. They take what has already been broken down, ammonia from waste, from decay, from the generosity of return, and shift it into forms the earth can pass forward. They do this in silence. No eyes witness their labor, but they are always there, working in pairs. First come the ammonia oxidizers. They take ammonium and gently transform it into nitrite, a form that begins to move. Then come the nitrite oxidizers, completing the turn, turning nitrite into nitrate, the most mobile, most accessible form for roots, step by step, hand to hand, molecule to molecule. You can think of them as translators, taking nitrogens, older stories, and making them understandable again to the new readers, the plants. Or you can think of them as river guides, smoothing the way for nitrogen's flow through soil and water, allowing it to move without confusion, without getting lost. The air is still above ground, but below, these tireless workers carry on. Their world is damp, granular, full of pockets of oxygen and absence, and they know how to move within it, sensing where balance is needed, where chemistry has stalled, and how to restart the flow. They live in places you rarely think of, in garden beds and forest floors, in rice paddies and estuaries, in the sediment of lakes, in your own backyard. Wherever decay gives birth to ammonium, they appear, ready to continue the cycle, ready to hold the middle, and because of them, plants grow stronger, roots reach deeper. The soil becomes more than a resting place. It becomes a living archive of motion and memory. You might never see a nitrifier, but every bite of food you've eaten has been touched by their work. Every crop, every leaf, every flower owes something to the transformations they orchestrate. Without them, nitrogen would sit still. Roots would strain in hunger. Rivers would fill with imbalance. They are not dramatic creators, nor final deliverers. They are the ones in between, the mediators, the ones who ensure that what was broken down can rise again, not in the same form, but in one that fits the new season. And in this quiet, you begin to understand that change is often like that, not immediate, but guided, not always seen, but necessary. Some transitions are soft and slow, like nitrogen becoming nitrate, like dusk becoming night. Their names, nitrosomonos, nitrobacter, may sound like spells, and in some ways they are. Living chemistry written into soil, whispered through generations. Their magic is balance, not too much, not too little, not too fast, not too slow. And balance, you realize, is a form of love. It takes care to ensure the next stage unfolds gently. It takes patience too. Remain invisible while holding everything together. These middle alchemists give nitrogen its readiness, not by force, but by listening to what the soil needs. And the soil is always speaking, in texture, in scent, in how it clings to your fingertips. It tells you if it's alive. It tells you if the cycle is whole. So tonight, as you drift into the folds of sleep, think of these quiet ones, not fixers, not releasers, but shapers. They teach us that between beginning and end, there is always transformation. There is always movement. There is always care. And as nitrate flows out through the soil, light and ready to be lifted into roots, you might wonder when that nitrogen enters a new plant, when it is drawn upward once more, What happens when there is too much, or when it flows too far? Cycles do not begin or end, they turn, slowly, silently, like breath, just as nitrogen falls from the sky and is pulled into soil, roots, leaves, and life, so too must it rise again. The earth does not keep what it cannot carry. It breathes in, yes, but it also exhales. And that breath, that quiet release, is guided by the denitrifiers. You may not know their names, you will never see them, but they are always there in the deep pockets of soil, in the mud of riverbeds, in the slow darkness of wetlands and coastal marshes. They are not many, not flashy, not fast, but they are patient, and they know when it is time to let go. Picture the journey of nitrogen so far fixed from the sky, taken into plants, cycled through animals, returned in waste, transformed by nitrogen, all of it preparing for new growth. But sometimes there is more than the earth can hold. Sometimes balance means returning what is not needed. This is where denitrifiers begin their work. They live where oxygen is scarce, not in the airy topsoil, but deeper where things are still, waterlogged, or compacted. There, in the quiet, they find nitrate and gently unbind it. Step by step, they breathe it in, using it as we use oxygen, and in doing so, release nitrogen gas back into the atmosphere. It's a kind of alchemy. Nitrate becomes nitrite, then nitric oxide, then nitrous oxide, and finally nitrogen gas, the same silent pair of atoms that once floated freely above your head, the same breath that began it all. These microbes do not hoard, they do not cling, they return, and in returning, they cleanse. Without denitrifiers, the world would overflow with nitrogen. Too much of a good thing can become harm, rivers choked with algae, soils turned sour, skies laced with greenhouse gases. But with these quiet caretakers, the system resets. Excess is exhaled. Space is made. There is a softness to their work. No flash of color, no smell, no change you can see. But they are guardians of equilibrium, of the pause between abundance and depletion. They keep the wheel from spinning too far. Even wetlands, often dismissed as swamps or margins, hold great power because of them. These soggy places, rich in detritus and shadow, are cradles for denitrifiers. They breathe for the planet in places no one walks. They remove what cannot stay and send it upward again, a gentle release into air. Let yourself breathe with them now. Inhale and remember the roots reaching down. Exhale and imagine nitrogen rising, quiet and free. You are not separate from this rhythm. Your breath mirrors it. You inhale what plants give. You exhale what they need. The air you take in. Once passed through soil, through microbes, through unseen spaces where nitrogen whispered its exit. And so the cycle completes, but only for a moment, because the sky does not keep what it's given. The nitrogen there drifts and waits to fall again, to be caught by roots again, to feed another life, another leaf, another you. Let that be your comfort tonight, that in this world of endings, nothing truly ends. There are only returns, and even in the quietest work, the work of letting go, a question remains, floating gently in the newly emptied air. Where will nitrogen fall next? And who will be there waiting to catch it? The natural rhythm of nitrogen is slow, a lullaby of patience, a turning wheel of careful change. From sky to root, from leaf to waste, from shadowed soil to breathless air, it moves softly, gently, in time with the seasons. But human hands, restless and reaching, have asked the cycle to hurry, and so we made fertilizer. At first it felt like magic, to take nitrogen from the air, that endless, silent ocean above, and bottle it into something solid, something usable, to feed crops that fed nations, to turn barren soil green in days. The Haber-Bosch process, born of fire and pressure, unlocked the sky. We learned to fix nitrogen ourselves on an industrial scale. What microbes once did quietly in the soil, we now do with machines and steel. Factories mimic the breath of bacteria, fusing nitrogen gas with hydrogen to create ammonia. Ammonia becomes fertilizer, and fertilizer becomes food. It worked, it still works, but like all shortcuts, it comes with a cost. You've seen the bright green of overfed lawns, the sudden bloom of farm fields, the rush of growth that fertilizer can bring. But beneath the surface, the cycle strains. It is not designed for this speed. The soil, so used to slow exchanges, to partnerships with microbes, begins to forget its old songs. Fertilizer, though rich, does not sing. You scatter it like rain, hoping it will feed the roots, but much of it never reaches them. It dissolves, it runs. It seeps into rivers, flows into lakes, pours out to sea, and with it the nitrogen hurries away, not into leaves, but into imbalance. Algae rise in response, blooming fast and thick. They drink the nitrate like sugar, and when they die, their bodies fall into the depths, drawing oxygen with them. Fish flee, waters choke. What was once a gift becomes a burden. Dead zones appear in oceans, places where life cannot breathe. You see, nitrogen is not a villain, but when it is rushed, when too much is given too fast, it loses its grace. The balance breaks, and in the soil, too, something is lost. Microbes go quiet, fungi recede. The living threads that wove nitrogen gently into roots no longer speak, silenced by the flood. The fixer bacteria are no longer needed. The nitrifiers are drowned in excess. The denitrifiers cannot keep up. This is not a scolding, only a noticing. Because you, too, live in a world of urgency. You are taught to hurry, to grow fast, to reach farther than before. But nature teaches something else. That real nourishment takes time. That the richest soil is the one that has rested. That not all hunger should be fed at once. There is a place for fertilizer. It has helped many. It has filled empty bowls. But it is not the whole story. It is not the full breath. The earth was not made to be sprinted through, and yet, even with all this rushing, the soil does not forget. It remembers how to breathe. There are fields where cover crops are planted, holding the soil in winter with gentle roots. There are farmers who feed the microbes, not just the plants, nurturing the underground community that sustains true fertility. There are wetlands rebuilt to catch what runs off, to let the denitrifiers exhale once more. There is wisdom returning, slow but certain, like nitrogen, and you too can pause. You can listen. You can stand in a garden and feel the patience of a bean sprouting slowly from seed. You can place your hand on the soil and sense whether it is alive or merely full. Even fertilizer, when given with care, can join the cycle, not as a rush, but as a gentle addition. But care must lead. Timing must guide, and the soil must not be silenced. The old partnerships, root and microbe, plant and fixer, still wait beneath your feet, waiting to be invited back, waiting for space, waiting for the return of time, because even in a world of speed, there is still a place for the slow, sacred rhythm of balance, and as the cycle spins forward again, You might wonder, in this age of rush, how do we know when the soil has had enough? There is a stillness in water that feels like a pause between thoughts, a pond holding its breath, a lake reflecting sky, a river curling around rocks, as though remembering where it's been. You look at these waters and see calm, but beneath that calm, something is stirring. Nitrogen has found its way here. It drips from fields and gardens, flows through pipes and drains, slips into streams. It does not mean harm. It is only moving from soil to water, carried on rain's shoulders. But in this journey, something changes. The water, once slow and clear, begins to fill with green dot. At first, it seems like life. Algae appear tiny, floating threads of photosynthesis. They grow in the presence of sun and nutrient. They multiply rapidly, hungrily. The water becomes richer, denser, softer in color, but heavier in weight. You see it spread, a bloom they call it, as if the pond were dressing itself in velvet. But velvet can smother, and blooms can blur. Algae are not the enemy. They are part of nature's vocabulary, present even in balance. But when nitrogen rushes in, unchecked, when the rhythm is too fast, too much, they overtake. They cover the surface in green, blocking light, consuming oxygen, turning still waters into thickened silence, and then they die. That is what no one tells you at first, that the bloom is only half the story. When algae grow beyond balance, they consume more than they give, and when they collapse, they fall. Their bodies drift downward, feeding bacteria that, in turn, consume the oxygen of the deep. The water no longer breathes. Fish rise, gasping to the surface. Plants at the bottom decay. What once held frogs and dragonflies and glinting silver minnows becomes lifeless, dull. A dead zone is born, not from poison, but from imbalance, not from noise, but from excess, from nitrogen given. To freely, it happens slowly, and then all at once. You look again at the water. You see green where there should be blue. You smell rot where there should be life. The pond no longer reflects the sky. It holds only its burden. This is eutrophication, the name given to the water's quiet drowning, and it reaches farther than you think. From the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico, from lakes in Africa to estuaries in China. Wherever nitrogen gathers, algae follow. Wherever algae bloom, oxygen fades. This is not punishment, it is a consequence. Nature, when pushed, does not break immediately, but it does bend, it absorbs, it endures, until it cannot. And then the cycle becomes a mirror, showing you what happens when gifts are given without rhythm. But here's the part that invites you back. The water remembers how to clear, just as soil remembers how to breathe. The water holds the potential to restore. Wetlands filter. Plants along riverbanks sip excess nitrogen before it flows downstream. Buffer zones catch the runoff. Algae, when given space and time, return to their role as quiet photosynthesizers. And even you, small as you may feel, can be part of that remembering. Every action has a ripple, choosing less, planting more, listening longer, letting rain soak into roots instead of rushing into drains, respecting the edge where land meets water, where nitrogen might pause before becoming a flood, because nature always seeks balance, but it cannot do so alone. You stand at the edge of a river now, real or imagined. The current moves past your feet. Somewhere upstream, nitrogen enters. Somewhere downstream, life depends on what happens next. You are in the middle, a witness, a participant, a steward. And though the green on the water may seem like the end, it is only a message, a gentle reminder to move more slowly, to ask where all things go when they are no longer needed. And, as the river carries that question onward, you begin to wonder, can the air, too, be burdened in ways just as silent, just as invisible, and just as full of consequence? You've smelled it before, that sharp, clean scent that follows. Lightning, not smoke, not rain, something stranger, metallic, electric. It lingers in the stillness after the sky speaks. It is ozone, yes, but hidden within that scent, quiet and invisible, is something else, something ancient, something essential. It is nitrogen, broken and reborn in the sky, up there, above the trees, above the rivers and fields. The atmosphere floats, vast, silent, seemingly empty, but it is rich. It is thick with nitrogen gas. Not just some, but most, nearly 4 out of every 5 breaths you take. And yet, despite its abundance, this nitrogen cannot feed plants. It is locked, inert, still, but lightning does what roots and rain cannot. When the sky cracks open in a storm, when a jagged thread of light leaps from cloud to ground, the air splits. Not metaphorically, literally, the energy is immense, hotter than the surface of the sun, and it tears apart nitrogen molecules that would otherwise float unshaken for centuries. And in that violence, something beautiful happens. The nitrogen, once held tight in pairs, separates. Freed, it reaches for oxygen, another gas in the air. Together they form nitrogen oxides, reactive, mobile, ready to descend. As the rain falls, it gathers these new compounds and carries them downward. Each droplet becomes a delivery. Each flash of lightning becomes a gift to the soil. You don't see it, but beneath your feet, the earth stirs. Roots whisper in the dark, sensing the change. Bacteria wake. The soil's hunger meets the sky's offering. It is one of the oldest pacts on earth, the thunder and the root. You might think of nitrogen as slow, as earthbound, as something that moves only through microbes and manure. But sometimes it falls like a whisper wrapped in thunder. A flash of light that feeds the forest. A spark that fertilizes. And it has always been this way. Long before humans learned to fix nitrogen with machines. Long before fertilizers were bagged and spread, lightning was feeding the land. Not always in great quantities, but consistently, reliably, enough for forests to rise, for grasses to spread, for life to find footing. Imagine it now, a storm rolling over a prairie, wind bending. The tall stems, dark clouds gathering. Then flash. A brief thread of white, silence. Then the scent. And then, without ceremony, the rain. And beneath it all, the soil drinks. You are part of that story, too. Your body, your blood, your breath, each depends on nitrogen, and some of it, somewhere, deep in your bones, was born in the sky. So you see, the atmosphere is not distant. It touches you with every inhale, and sometimes it feeds you with fire. The hunger of the soil is not loud. It doesn't cry out. It doesn't demand. It waits. Patient, open for the slow return of what life needs. And lightning answers. But now, in this world of cities and signals, we often forget the sky's quiet generosity. We forget that storms do more than frighten or flood. They feed, and still they come, uninvited, undirected, threading the land with nitrogen, even when no one watches. So the next time you see lightning, pause, breathe, smell the shift in the air. And remember that even in its most dramatic moments, the earth is quietly sustaining itself, the sky giving to the soil, the flame giving to the root. And just as nitrogen descends from the storm, you might wonder, where else might the sky be offering gifts so subtle we do not yet know how to name them? You lie quietly now, breath slow, limbs heavy, but even in stillness, something inside you stirs, within each of your cells, in your muscles, your brain, your beating heart. Nitrogen moves, not with rush or force, but as a silent presence. It weaves through you like a remembered song, too old to trace, too deep to hear directly. You carry the sky within you. That may sound poetic, but it is also real. The nitrogen in your DNA, in the amino acids that build your body, once floated freely in the atmosphere. It once passed through a leaf. It once settled into the soil after a storm. It once fed a root, ripened a grain, rested in a fruit, and then, through breath and bite, it found you. You are a chapter in nitrogen's story. Your bones, your blood, they're not just made of carbon and calcium. They hold nitrogen in gentle scaffolds, maintaining the code of who you are. Without it, there would be no instructions, no proteins, no thought. Even the neurons that flicker in your brain rely on nitrogen-built messengers. Each memory you hold has been written, in part, by soil. You may think of the nitrogen cycle as something out there, something in the fields, in the clouds, in the oceans. But it loops through you, too, quietly and without permission. You do not command it. You receive it. You are not separate from the earth's breathing. You are one inhalation in a longer exhale. And just as nitrogen came to you, it will one day leave you, not in a dramatic moment, not all at once, but gently, like mist returning to sky. Your body, all its beauty, its complexity, its temporary spark, is not a possession. It is a loan, a vessel, a brief arrangement of borrowed atoms, drawn from the air, from the water, from food grown in soil, held together for a time, then passed on. This is not loss, it is belonging. You belong to a cycle so vast it wraps around the planet, a cycle older than your name, more generous than your knowing, a cycle that turns you not into nothing, but into everything else. One day, long after your final breath, your nitrogen will return to a flower, a fungus, a fox, to something rooted or something roaming. Perhaps you become the green of a leaf. Perhaps you become part of a breeze. Perhaps you rise again as thunder splits the sky. But for now, you hold it. And while you do, you think, you feel, you dream. That is nitrogen's most delicate work, not just in leaves or rivers, but in consciousness, in the quiet spark of being aware, in the knowledge that you are both matter and moment, both grounded and rising. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, rest in the wonder that your body is not static. It is part of a movement, a sacred borrowing. You are made of the earth, yes, but you are also made of the breath, the earth. Let's go. And as you lie here, still and soft, you might begin to ask, if your body holds nitrogen's memory, might the trees remember you too? At dawn, a farmer walks into the field. Boots press into dew-covered earth. The soil is still cool. The sky is still quiet. But beneath it all, something ancient hums, the slow, invisible turning of nitrogen. You may not see it from the road, or feel it from your window, but here, in this place between weather and root, the farmer becomes part of a quiet choreography, not of control, but of deep listening. Farmers do not move nitrogen the way machines do. They do not fix it with fire or bind it with speed. Instead, they learn its rhythm. They follow its flow, patient, alert, like one listening to a whisper through wind. Each crop planted is a question. Each season is an answer. Some farmers know, by the curl of a leaf or the color of a stalk, what the soil is asking for. Too much nitrogen, and the plant may stretch too tall, too fast, bright and brittle. Too little, and it stunts small. Faded, quiet in the wrong way. So they watch, they feel, and often they wait, because timing is everything. Nitrogen does not always arrive when it is needed. Rain may wash it away, wind may carry it, and the soil, though generous, cannot always hold what is poured into it. That's why some farmers plant cover crops in the off-season, not for food, but for balance. Legumes, like clover or vetch, partner with bacteria to pull nitrogen from the sky and stitch it softly into the earth. No machines, no noise, just roots, nodules, and time. Others rotate crops: corn one year, beans the next, each plant leaving something different in the ground, each asking for a different rhythm of nourishment. It is not just science, it is not just tradition, it is a kind of reverence for cycles, for systems, for the knowledge that you cannot force what must be coaxed. And when harvest comes, nitrogen leaves again, wrapped in kernels, tucked into stems. It moves from soil to table, from land to body, from farmer to you. But farmers don't just give nitrogen to the land. They also try to protect it, keeping it from rushing into rivers, from floating into the sky as waste. They build buffer zones, plant trees along fields, slow the runoff with ditches that hold water a little longer. They are not perfect. Fertilizer still flows too fast in many places. Crops are still pushed to grow more, faster, fuller. But many farmers are trying to return to something slower, something more attuned, because they know the soil has memory. The land remembers how it was treated, and so they kneel beside rows not just to plant, but to listen to the worms, to the moisture, to the breath of the ground. You may never see this from above, the vast orchestration of nutrients, sunlight, and time. But under every meal, behind every fruit, is someone who followed nitrogen's path with care. Farming is not just growing food. It is nurturing a conversation between species, between elements. It is weaving the sky into the root and passing it forward, meal by meal, mouth by mouth. So tonight, as you settle into sleep, know that someone, somewhere, has walked a field, not to take from it, but to tend its unseen balance. And as you drift, you might begin to wonder what becomes of the nitrogen that leaves the field but doesn't feed the leaf. Where does it travel, and what stories does it carry as it moves beyond the soil? You step into a forest. The light softens. The air thickens. Your footsteps hush, swallowed by moss, by leaves, by time around you. Trees stand like old thoughts, tall, still watching, but beneath your feet a quieter world hums. Here too, nitrogen flows, not with haste, not with pressure, but with a slowness that only forests understand. A rhythm that does not seek growth for its own sake, but listens instead for balance, for memory, for return. Every fallen leaf is a beginning. You watch one drift, brown, curled, light as breath. Settling into the forest floor, it does not end. It becomes the leaf, like every piece of living matter, holds nitrogen within its veins, once pulled from the sky, once built into sugar, now gently offered back to the soil, and in that soil a web awakens, tiny decomposers, fungi, bacteria, silent as dust begin their work. Not hurried, not careless. They unweave the leaf, thread by thread, returning nitrogen to a form the forest can use again. This is the forest's version of a conversation. It doesn't shout, it doesn't repeat itself. It remembers. Some trees hold on to nitrogen for decades. Others pass it from root to root, leaf to leaf, through vast fungal networks, the wood wide web. Some call it an underground network of communication, of exchange. Through this web, nutrients move, not randomly, but with purpose. From old trees to young saplings, from healthy to struggling neighbors, from those with more to those in need. It is not charity. It is not transaction. It is something more intimate, a language of molecules spoken in silence. You might think of nitrogen as simple, as just an element, but in forests it becomes story, held in the heartwood of a redwood, stored in the thick needles of a pine, released slowly from a rotting lug that feeds the next generation. And sometimes it lingers in deep forest soils, held fast in organic matter for years, even centuries. Not all nitrogen moves quickly. Some of it waits to be taken up, waits to be needed, waits for fire or flood, or the soft tip of a root reaching for more. Forests are reservoirs of nitrogen, but they are not banks. They do not hoard, they share, continuously, silently, and when a tree falls, it does not just make space for light, it makes space for release of carbon, of memory, and yes, of nitrogen. The forest floor becomes a quiet feast. Mushrooms bloom. Microbes gather. The fallen becomes the fertile, and the cycle continues. Not as repetition, but as renewal. You breathe in now, and somewhere in that breath, a nitrogen atom, once held by a leaf, now moves through you. You, the forest, and the sky, are not separate stories. You are sentences in the same paragraph. You are different forms of the same conversation. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine the sound of leaves touching soil. Imagine roots stretching unseen toward something they trust is there. Imagine a tree feeding its own kin, not with words, but with the quiet offering of nitrogen. And as the forest hums gently beneath the moon, you may wonder what happens when this patient cycle meets fire. When flame comes not as destroyer, but as part of the forest's memory too. You close your eyes and drift as if floating just below the ocean's surface, buoyed by salt and silence. Here, nitrogen still moves, but not through roots or rain, not through soil or seed. It glides and swirls, carried on tides, hidden in plankton, woven into fish, algae, and coral bones. This is the ocean's nitrogen, a cycle softer than wind, slower than forest decay, but no less vital. Down where sunlight touches reef, you find an explosion of color and life. Coral colonies, each made of thousands of tiny polyps, stretch like undersea cities, sheltering fish, sponges, and sea stars. Coral may seem still, but it hums with activity. It breathes, it eats, it builds, and hidden in that life is nitrogen. Shared, exchanged, recycled, tiny algae called zooxanthellae live inside coral tissue. They photosynthesize, just like plants on land, using sunlight to make sugars, and in return, coral offers them shelter and nitrogen in the form of ammonium, a waste product from its own metabolism. Nothing is wasted here. What one creature lets go, another uses. This is how reefs thrive in oceans poor in nutrients. They cycle nitrogen in tight, efficient loops, passing it from coral to algae, from fish waste to plankton, from life to life again. It's not abundance that makes the reef rich. It's cooperation, and yet nitrogen also arrives from afar, carried by rivers, blown by storms, or drifting upward from deeper ocean currents. Phytoplankton, the ocean's invisible gardens, float near the surface, blooming when nitrogen is near. They feed on nitrates and ammonium, multiplying in vast numbers, becoming the base of the marine food web. Zooplankton eat them. Fish eat the zooplankton. Sharks and dolphins follow. And so nitrogen, once dissolved in water, moves upward, transformed at every step, until it leaps into motion, into muscle, into movement. You feel it now, the pulse of it. A rhythm as old as tides, as mysterious as moonlight on waves. But too much nitrogen, even here, can tip the balance. When fertilizers and waste rush into the sea, they carry with them forms of nitrogen the ocean doesn't need, not in such quantities, not so fast. Algae bloom wildly, oxygen drops, fish flee, coral weakens, dead zones form where little survives. So the ocean, like the forest, needs pause, needs breath, needs balance. But when the ocean breathes well, when coral glows with life, when plankton bloom in rhythm with current and light, something astonishing happens. Nitrogen moves between sea and sky. Through denitrification in the sediments, bacteria send nitrogen gas back into the atmosphere. Through upwelling, deep waters rise, carrying nutrients, including nitrogen, to the surface, feeding life once more. The sea speaks to the air speaks to the land, and the loop continues. You are part of it, even now. The oxygen you breathe was made in part by ocean plankton. The nitrogen in your cells may once have passed through a fish, or drifted in a jellyfish's lazy pulse. You are not above the sea. You are within its story. So as you lie quietly tonight, imagine yourself floating just above a coral reef, where nitrogen cycles in loops so tight they shimmer, where life grows not by greed but by giving, and just before sleep takes you. You may begin to wonder, when the sea remembers nitrogen so well, what does the air carry between water and land, waiting to be felt but not yet named? You sit at your window. Outside, the city breathes in headlights and chimneys, in sirens and streetlights. You hear it in the hum of tires on wet asphalt, in the quiet pulse of electricity beneath your floor. But beneath this human rhythm, a quieter current runs the nitrogen cycle, threading even through the concrete. You might not see it in the way you see trees or oceans, but cities, with all their steel and spark, are woven into nitrogen's journey. Every car engine that fires, every power plant that churns, every spark of heat or light releases nitrogen oxides into the air. Invisible gases rising into the atmosphere, changing the chemistry of clouds, influencing rain, fog, and the breath you take in. Even here, where wildflowers struggle to grow between sidewalk cracks, nitrogen flows in storm drains, in exhaust. In smog, when it rains, city streets wash nitrogen downward, from rooftops, from gutters, from roads. It doesn't disappear. It flows, it moves through pipes and channels, through underground rivers built by people. It finds streams, then rivers, then oceans. This runoff, rich in nutrients, may seem like waste, but it is power misdirected, fertilizer that never fed a root, nitrogen that never touched a leaf in cities. Food arrives from elsewhere, grown in distant fields, packed, shipped, unwrapped, and when it's eaten, the nitrogen inside passes through you and enters sewage systems, wastewater plants, landfills, cities. Exports nitrogen in complex ways through air, water, and human waste. Yet they also import it constantly in meals, in goods, in the fuel that feeds motion. And still, life grows, here in parks. Nitrogen feeds the soil beneath playgrounds and pines. In rooftop gardens, it trickles through herbs and tomatoes. Even in tiny urban forests, planted between buildings. The old rhythms continue, roots taking in, leaves giving back. Earth remembering how to breathe. You might think cities are separate, from nature sealed in glass, lifted on concrete, but nitrogen reminds you otherwise. It connects the crowded street to the forest trail, the apartment kitchen to the coral reef. Cities are just new voices in an ancient dialogue, but their voice is loud, and sometimes too fast. Too much nitrogen released too quickly creates smog, acid rain, eutrophic rivers. Not by malice, but by momentum. Not by evil, but by inattention. Yet even in this imbalance, there is hope, because cities can learn. Urban planners plant more trees. Green roofs bloom above grocery stores. Wetlands are restored on city edges to filter runoff and quiet the flow. Public transport reduces nitrogen emissions. Electric vehicles shift the chemistry of the air. Wastewater plants evolve, not just to remove, but to recover nitrogen, to return it to the soil that once gave. Even a compost bin on a balcony joins the cycle, food scraps returning to earth, to nourish instead of discard. You, too, are part of this. With every choice, every step, you shape how nitrogen moves. You may never see the molecules, but your breath touches them. Your plate reflects them. Your city exhales them. Tonight, as the streetlights flicker and distant traffic softens into lullaby, you begin to feel it. This pulse beneath the pavement, this cycle threading through cables and clouds alike. And as you fall into stillness, you might begin to wonder if cities shape the cycle so powerfully. How does the atmosphere itself respond? What song does nitrogen sing in the air that wraps the entire world? You kneel beside a tree. Its trunk rises quietly, but what lies below is even quieter still. Beneath the bark and soil, beyond what roots alone can reach, a secret network waits, woven not from wire or thought, but from filaments as fine as breath. This is the mycorrhizal web, a fungal lace that stretches through forest soil, binding tree to tree, root to root, in a conversation older than language. You cannot see it, but it is there, alive, delicate, aware. The fungi begin as slender threads, hyphae so small they slip between soil grains. They grow outward, reaching, connecting, until they become something more. A mycelial network, spanning meters, acres, even entire forests. They do not speak in words, they speak in nutrients. Nitrogen flows through them, a quiet trade between species. The fungi take it in from soil, where roots alone may not reach, and in return, they receive sugar, crafted by leaves from sun and sky. But this isn't just a transaction, it is something gentler, something generous. The fungi do not serve just one tree. They serve many, an entire community of plants, oaks and firs, maples and mosses, linked beneath the surface. Through this network, nitrogen moves, from trees that have more to those that need it, from old giants to young saplings, still finding their place in the light. This is not competition, it is care. You picture it now, a shaded forest path, above which sunlight dapples leaves, and below which nitrogen flows like a shared heartbeat. When one tree struggles from drought, or shade, or age, others respond. Fungi carry nitrogen and phosphorus like comfort offered in darkness. There are even cases where trees of different species, those we once thought separate, exchange nitrogen through fungal threads. Birch to fir, alder to maple, diversity becoming unity beneath the soil's surface. You might imagine this network as a nervous system, a sensing web that not only moves nutrients but responds to damage, warns of pests, and strengthens bonds. A forest is not a collection of individuals, it is a chorus, and mycorrhizal fungi are the quiet harmony that holds it together. And still, there is mystery. Fungi do more than connect. They shape what nitrogen becomes. Some fungi break apart proteins in decaying leaves, freeing nitrogen to feed trees once more. Others fix nitrogen directly from the air, a task once thought only microbes could do. And all this happens without sound, without spectacle, just movement, patient and constant life, ferrying life. You pause to imagine your own place in this network. Your body, too, carries nitrogen, once held by leaves, once passed between fungi and root. You are, in a way, woven into this underground map, a brief visitor in the loop. But not apart from it, and perhaps, this way of giving and receiving without asking, without taking too much, is something you already understand. Tonight, as you rest, think of the forest floor, rich with invisible threads, gentle hands cradling the soil's breath. Let your thoughts follow the path of nitrogen, from spore to root, from tree to tree, from silence into green dot. And as your body softens into stillness, you may find yourself wondering if fungi build networks in the earth, what quiet webs might wind their way through the very air we breathe. You breathe in, and though the air feels empty, it carries more than oxygen. It holds the hush of old roots, the residue of ancient fires, the quiet presence of nitrogen, not in the form your body can use, but still it surrounds you. It cushions every inhale, fills the sky with invisible weight. And yet, what matters most is the nitrogen you carry inside. You are not just breathing, you are part of a current that flows from soil to seed, from plant to plate, from cell to breath. Every bite you eat, grains, greens, beans, eggs, carries nitrogen, tucked within amino acids, woven into proteins. A language your body reads to build muscle, mend tissue, and carry thought. Even the quiet throb of your heart, the rise and fall of sleep, the soft blinking of your eyes depend on this invisible thread passing silently through you. Inside your cells, nitrogen helps write the story of your body. It is in your DNA, every spiral, every twist built on bases that contain nitrogen's pulse. You are, quite literally, written by nitrogen, and when your body breaks food down, it doesn't keep all the nitrogen. Some of it is released, exhaled not as breath, but passed through urine or sweat, returned to the earth in forms other organisms can use. Animals, like you, are bridges. You don't create nitrogen, you borrow it. The cow in a distant field, grazing on nitrogen-fed grass, chews and transforms that grass into milk, into bone, into life. The fox in a forest, eating the rabbit that ate the leaf that held the nitrogen fixed by a root-bound microbe. That fox continues the loop. Every animal is a loop within the loop. Each bite taken, each breath drawn, each waste returned, marks a point in nitrogen's quiet orbit. And so, when animals die, their bodies, too, become gifts. Proteins decay, Nitrogen seeps into soil, where microbes wake and begin again. Even your own body will one day release its hold. Not in fear, but in rhythm, and the nitrogen you carried will pass into new roots, new leaves, new mouths. This is not loss, it is legacy. As you listen now, you might imagine all the creatures alive in this single moment. Birds flying, insects stirring, fish gliding through deep rivers, each one carrying a small amount of nitrogen, just enough to keep life going, just enough to keep the wheel turning. Even creatures you rarely see, earthworms burrowing, bacteria swimming in a pond, a fox blinking beneath moonlight, they too participate. Their movements are stories of nitrogen just as much as yours, and still the cycle expands. Manure enriches the field. Decomposers break it down. Bacteria convert it. Plants absorb it. You return again to the beginning. Tonight, you are not just a listener. You are part of the breathing earth, woven into its cycles, even while you rest. And as sleep approaches, you may begin to wonder if your body is built from borrowed nitrogen. What does your breath give back to the smallest lives you cannot even see? You lie still. Somewhere in the silence of your skin, a trillion tiny lives stir. They do not sleep as you do. They do not dream. But they are always at work. Microbes too small to see, too ancient to measure, too vital to ignore. They live on your hands, in your lungs, across your tongue. But most of all, they live in the soil beneath your feet. It looks like dirt to you. Dry, brown, plain. But to microbes, it is a cathedral. A vast and living city, with towers of sand, bridges of water, and endless rooms filled with the echoes of nitrogen. This is where the real work of the nitrogen cycle happens, not in leafy trees or clever machines, but in the quiet, damp corners of the earth, where bacteria whisper to each other in chemical threads. You may never meet them, but you owe them everything. They take what's left behind, the fallen leaf, the lost feather, the lifeless body, and break it apart. Not to destroy, but to transform. They unweave what was once alive, and reweave it into something ready for life. Again, a microbe meets a strand of protein, and gently unties the nitrogen within. Another carries it across a film of water to a nearby root. Another locks it into ammonium, ready for the next hand in the cycle. They work without instruction, without hesitation, as if they remember the shape of the world long before we ever walked upon it. Some fix nitrogen from the air, those ancient alchemists you met in earlier chapters. Others convert it from one form to another, like translators at the edge of time. And some, like denitrifiers, send nitrogen back to the sky, not as an ending, but as an exhale, a soft release before it begins again. In each gram of healthy soil, billions of microbes live. A spoonful holds more life than the entire population of Earth, and yet we walk over them. We bury seeds into their world, rarely noticing the web of purpose beneath our toes. Without them, the world would choke on waste. Without them, nitrogen would stop moving. Without them, plants could not grow. And you would not be here. Microbes are the silent librarians of the planet, cataloging decay and storing renewal. They record stories in carbon, in nitrate, in the dust of what came before. And though they are small, their influence is vast. They shaped the air you breathe. They built the soil you stand upon. They forged the food you eat. Tonight, they hum in the belly of the earth. You can't hear them, but their rhythm is constant. Their presence is grounding. You are held in their story. You are shaped by it. When you sit beneath a tree, the nitrogen that feeds its roots may have passed through 10,000 microbial hands. When you sip water from a river, you sip traces of their work, the cleaning, the cycling, the unseen dance. And as you exhale now, you let go of your own tiny threads, molecules that may one day be found again in a blade of grass, in the wing of a beetle, in the heartbeat of something still to come. In this way, you become a storyteller too, not in words, but in atoms. You are not separate from the earth's small lives. You are one of them, larger, perhaps, but equally fleeting, equally important. And as sleep brushes the edges of your mind, you might wonder if microbes build and dissolve the fabric of life, who guides the pattern of nitrogen through the changing climate of a warming earth. You lie down now, not on your bed, but in your imagination, on warm soil, somewhere quiet, beneath an open sky, beside a tree that listens more than it speaks. Close your eyes, there. Let your thoughts drift downward, past the rustling leaves, past the stretching roots, down into the silent heart of the earth. Beneath all movement, beneath all stories, something deeper pulses, a rhythm, slow, patient, ancient. It is not the chime of seconds or the sweep of minutes. It is the tempo of centuries of forests rising and falling, of oceans breathing through ice and heat. This is the pulse of the planet, and it beats with nitrogen. Every time a leaf falls, every time a creature dies, every time rain strikes soil, the cycle begins again. It is not a perfect circle, but more like a spiral, winding through time, always returning, but never exactly the same. You feel it in the wind, in the soft exchange of molecules between soil and sky. You see it in the color of a field, deep green in summer, pale gold in autumn. Even the weather whispers it. Rain carries nitrogen from the clouds, lightning cracks it open, snow buries it gently until the thaw. Every ecosystem beats with this cycle, though in different rhythms. In a rainforest, nitrogen moves fast, cycling rapidly through life and decay. In a desert, it moves slow, waiting for water, waiting for time, and still. The pulse continues, from the tundra to the coral reef, from the city drain to the belly of a grazing deer. Nitrogen flows. Your own breath, your muscles, your thoughts depend on this movement. You are not separate from it. You are a soft drum, echoing its rhythm. Sometimes the beat quickens. When humans spread fertilizer, when fields are tilled, when engines burn and factories hum, nitrogen floods the system. The cycle becomes loud, unsteady. Algae bloom where rivers once flowed clear. Air thickens with compounds it cannot quiet. Balance slips, and the earth's pulse stumbles, but nature remembers. Microbes adjust, forests hold what they can, and slowly the cycle seeks its center again. You are not here to control this rhythm. You are here to feel it, to recognize the miracle of motion happening beneath your every step. Imagine, now, a thread, a glowing line of nitrogen traveling through time, from a star's collapse to a lightning strike, to the leaf in your hand. Imagine it pulsing, softly, surely, a heartbeat that belongs to Earth itself. As you listen, you begin to notice how your own rhythm matches. The rise and fall of breath, the quiet pace of thought, the steady hush of a resting body. It is all part of the same beat, a planetary lullaby. And perhaps, if you listen closely, you may ask yourself if nitrogen holds the pulse of the earth. What story is it still waiting to tell in the rising warmth of a changing world? You lower yourself gently, knees pressing into the soft ground, hands resting on the earth's surface, warm, cracked, damp, or dry. Depending on where you are and when you choose to listen, the soil does not speak in words, but it is never silent. Its messages move slowly, in the scent after rain, in the texture that clings to your skin, in the quiet decay of leaf and root. To listen to the soil is to slow your own heartbeat, to let your thoughts settle like dust on still water. It takes patience to hear what the earth has been saying all along. For centuries, the soil has offered itself as cradle, as giver, as keeper of cycles. It has accepted our seeds, held our harvests, absorbed our waste, and borne the weight of our footsteps. But in return, it has asked for time, for balance, for care. Lately, though, the soil is tired. Not angry, never angry, just exhausted. Too much taken too quickly. Too many chemicals poured in without rest, without reverence. The soil remembers everything. It remembers the forests that once stood. It remembers the rivers that shifted. Of course, it remembers the slow return of nitrogen through the breath of microbes, the fall of animals, the hush of fungi below. And when we forget to listen, the soil grows quiet, not because it has nothing left to say, but because it has said it so many times. Still, it waits. It waits for your hand to press gently into it, for your eyes to notice that a weed is not always a nuisance, that a worm is not just a wriggle, but a messenger of health. When you walk barefoot, you read the surface, the warmth or chill, the firmness or give. But when you kneel, when you pause, you begin to understand the layers beneath. You start to feel the rhythm of things, the thin threads of mycorrhizal fungi, passing messages and nutrients, the slow pulse of microbial life, working tirelessly to rebuild. The nitrogen, always moving, sometimes fast, sometimes hidden, but never lost. Listening to the soil means you accept you are not above it. You are within it, of it, even now. Your body carries pieces of soil that once lived far away, in plants you ate, in animals you touched, in water that flowed through invisible underground veins. You return the favor in small ways, through breath, through compost, through care, and in those moments when your actions are gentle, the soil responds. It becomes a little more alive, a little more willing to hold your roots again. Farmers know this. Gardeners learn it. Children feel it intuitively when they dig with bare fingers, not looking for anything, but finding everything. This listening is not loud. It is not busy. It asks nothing of your voice and everything of your attention. And as you listen longer, you notice something else. The soil does not resist change. It simply asks that change be slow. It accepts the new, so long as the old is remembered. And now, at this hour, with your eyes heavy, your breath slow, you lie not just upon the soil, but with it. You understand, in a way that is not intellectual, but deeply felt, that the earth is not a machine to fix, but a story to rejoin. You are part of that story. A sentence, a line, a breath. The nitrogen in your body will someday return to this soil. And maybe, just maybe, it will feed a tree whose roots speak to the fungi, whose leaves speak to the wind, whose falling shade invites another to kneel and listen. The soil is not asking for everything. It is asking for presence. And as your thoughts quiet, as sleep draws near, you may wonder if we can learn to listen again. Can we learn to live in a way that doesn't just take from the earth, but sings gently back to it? And what would it sound like if the planet could truly hear our return to reverence? You lie still now, your body warm and quiet, sinks softly into the hush of the moment. The breath you take in carries more than air. It carries story. Each inhale is older than memory, a legacy of cycles you never see but always feel there. Is nitrogen in your lungs, not from this moment alone, but from many before it? From the breath of ancient animals, from the whisper of decomposing leaves, from the silent sparks of faraway lightning breaking open molecules in the sky, you are not separate from this. You are threaded into it, woven into the slow tapestry of time, where nitrogen moves from star to soil, from plant to plate, from breath to thought. Your body is not a border, but a bridge. It holds what came before and prepares what will come. Next, the protein in your muscles, the amino acids building your dreams, all of them need nitrogen, and every atom of it was once somewhere else. You are not borrowing it, not really. You are holding it, gently, just long enough for life to keep moving. Even in sleep, your cells work quietly. They mend, they grow, they echo the ancient dance that began in the dust of stars and now hums softly within you. You are more than a passenger in this nitrogen journey. You are a participant. Your choices ripple. Your rhythms matter. The food you eat, the soil you walk upon, the air you breathe and share, it is all part of the pattern, and you, fragile and immense, are a pattern too. When you are kind to the earth is kind back. When you listen to its silence, you begin to hear the complexity in stillness, the quiet logic of cycles that never needed our instruction. You don't need to understand every chemical name, every step in the process, to feel its presence. Sometimes, the most important understanding is the one that sits quietly in the body, a sense of place, a sense of belonging. You are not a mistake of evolution, not a burden on the system. You are a moment of balance in a story that has no final chapter. Even your eventual return, your last breath, your body folding back into the earth, is part of this gift. You will give back what you were given, and something new will rise. From it, a blade of grass, a sleeping fox, a single fern unfurling in the quiet shade of a forest morning. None of this is far from you. It is you. So tonight, as you close your eyes, know that your resting body is not idle. It is part of a pattern, breathing in, breathing out, holding nitrogen for a little while, then passing it on, like a lantern held briefly in a long, luminous chain. Let that be your comfort. Let that be your peace. And as your thoughts dim, you may wonder what else are you made of that belongs not just to you, but to all of life. You hold a seed in your palm. It weighs almost nothing, a speck of silence, but inside it hums with memory, with stories, with instructions whispered through centuries of green. Each seed is a time capsule, not just of species, but of nitrogen, of soil, of sunlight caught and folded into form. What you see as stillness is really a pause in motion, a breath between symphonies. Seeds do not grow blindly. They remember the nitrogen taken in by their mother plant, how it was drawn from soil and woven into chlorophyll, into amino acids, into the structure of hope. That nitrogen is passed down, part of the seed's body, part of its dream. The seed waits, cradled by the ground, watching temperature, measuring moisture, counting hours of darkness, as if reading a poem written by the planet. And when the signal comes, a shift in light, a softening of frost, a murmur, from the roots the seed responds, not with noise, but with motion. Its outer coat loosens, its insides stir. The nitrogen it carries becomes part of a new story, enzymes forming, cells dividing, roots exploring downward while leaves reach for sky. The past becomes the future with every gentle unfolding. And here, beneath this quiet rebirth, the nitrogen begins its journey again. It is not static, never has been. The seed's own nitrogen moves into root hairs, into green tips, into tiny veins of leaf and stem, becoming structure, function, song. It will be shared again, perhaps eaten by a mouse, or by you, perhaps. The plant will die back, its nitrogen released by decay and returned to soil, and somewhere, another seed will rise. Do you see it now? The seed is not only a beginning, it is a memory folded into potential. It is the earth writing itself again and again with molecules that never tire. Even the smallest seeds, the dust-like ones of orchids, the feathered puffs of milkweed, carry within them this coded truth. We are made of what came before, and what we are will one day become what comes next. There's something deeply comforting in that, isn't there? That no nitrogen molecule is wasted. That even in dormancy, life is preparing. Even in pause, life is listening. You might think of the seeds around you now, in the ground, in bags waiting to be sown, in the fruit on your table. You might realize how much nitrogen they hold, quietly and faithfully, without asking for attention, and as you drift into rest, you, too, might carry something forward, a breath, a thought, a trace of memory wrapped in softness, because you are not separate from the seed. You are its sibling in the cycle, its partner in patience, its echo in motion. Tomorrow, perhaps, you'll walk past a patch of sprouting green and feel the quiet flutter of recognition. The seed rises again, and so do you. And as the roots press into the soil once more, you may begin to wonder who else listens in the dark, trading whispers of nitrogen without leaf or limb. Take a deep breath. You may not feel it, but your lungs are part of a story, much older than you. With each inhale, you draw in what leaves once made, a gift from green things. With each exhale, you return something borrowed. Breathing is not just a rhythm of life. It is a thread in the vast web of nitrogen's endless movement. You are not alone in this act. Every animal, every creature that sleeps, runs, swims, or sings, they too inhale and exhale. They too become part of the cycle. Inside your body, nitrogen hums silently through your blood, woven into the proteins that build your muscles, that form your thoughts, that allow your heart to beat and your skin to heal. But where did it begin? The nitrogen in you once drifted in the air. It may have passed through a plant's root, or nestled in the belly of a fox. It may have been exhaled by a bird over the sea, or cycled through a raindrop before entering the leaf of a tree that fed a deer, and now, for a moment, it rests in you. Animals do not fix nitrogen, they do not bind it directly from the air, but they pass it along in every breath, in every footprint, in every forgotten feather or fallen scale. Your body, like theirs, is a temporary home for nitrogen. And when your body returns to the earth, as all bodies must, the nitrogen within you will return. To dot it will feed the soil, or rise again through decay, or nourish the roots of a young tree you'll never meet. In the dense forest, beneath the feet of a roaming bear, nitrogen moves in silence. The bear feeds on berries and fish. Nitrogen enters, is transformed, and continues in the ocean. A whale exhales a great plume of breath into the sky. Its body, massive and ancient, is filled with nitrogen shaped by plankton and krill. In the sky, a hawk circles, feathers, bones and eyes, all laced with nitrogen once drawn from the soil below. Even the smallest insect, buzzing through a garden at dusk, carries this molecular story within its wings. No one is excluded. Every being with breath plays a part. When animals eat, they borrow nitrogen. When they grow, they shape it. And when they die, they release it, offering it back to the system that gave it life. You, too, are part of that quiet conversation. Not as a watcher, but as a participant. The food you eat, the thoughts you think, the warmth in your limbs, they are made, in part, by the same nitrogen that glows in the leaves of summer and rests in the bones of wolves. The boundaries between creature and soil blur when you follow nitrogen's path. No matter how different our shapes, or how distant our homes, all animals breathe the same air, touch the same cycle, and return the same gifts. This is the silent unity of life. Not spoken, but inhaled. Not seen, but felt. And so when you lie still, breathing gently beneath a night sky, remember that you are part of something continuous. Your breath joins the fox in the thicket, the owl on the branch, the fish in the stream, the soil beneath the grass, and in this joining, nitrogen moves again. What enters as air may soon become earth, and what rests in your body may one day bloom as blossom or feather or pore. So close your eyes now. Feel your own breath as a thread, fine, ancient, and unseen. And as you drift, ask yourself softly, what other lives does your breath remember? You wake in the quiet of a winter morning. Outside your window, the world has turned soft. Snow smooths the edges of stone and branch, blanketing everything in a hush so complete it feels like the earth has stopped breathing, but it hasn't. Beneath the frost and stillness, beneath layers of white silence, a slow rhythm continues. The nitrogen cycle does not sleep. It moves like breath under a blanket, gentle, slowed, but never gone. You might imagine winter as an end, a pause in the dance of life. But winter is not an ending. It is a chamber of quiet preparation. It is sleep, not death. Underneath frozen soil, roots hold memory. Seeds curl inward, their shells holding stories fed by the nitrogen stored in the autumn. Even the snow itself plays a part. Each flake carries trace elements from the sky, and when it falls, quietly, gracefully, it delivers those gifts to the earth. Nitrogen from the atmosphere clings to snow crystals, and when the thaw comes, those silent passengers melt into soil, feeding the earliest stirrings of spring. You may not hear it, but the soil listens, even now. Frozen microbes stir in their slow slumber, waiting, sensing, ready to rise again when the warmth returns. There are bacteria that thrive in cold. They do not race. They meander, breaking down the remnants of for's decay, transforming nitrogen. Even in the coldest months, under the leaf litter, under the spruce, life hums, low. A fox walks lightly across a snowy field. Its breath steams into the cold air. Its body a warm container of nitrogen that once fed a rabbit, that once fed a root, that once fell as rain from the clouds above. Even in winter's stillness, the cycle loops. Your own body knows this rhythm. You feel the pull to rest, to slow down, to reflect. It is not only instinct, it is participation. You are aligning, perhaps unknowingly, with the sleeping heartbeat of the planet. Snow is often seen as silence, but silence can be full. Snow is not the absence of movement. It is the soft cover that protects it. It tucks in the soil like a blanket. It keeps warmth from escaping too fast. It preserves the nitrogen-rich humus underneath. keeping it ready for the stirrings of spring. You might imagine a forest in winter, trees bare, sky grey, yet beneath your feet 1,000 invisible threads hold the memory of summer. The roots remember the green, the fungi still link trees together, and nitrogen, that quiet traveller, waits in molecules, stored and stilled, ready to move again. The snow does not interrupt the cycle, it protects it. It gives time, it gives rest, and in that rest, something sacred unfolds. Without winter, there can be no spring. Without sleep, there can be no waking. So when you see a frozen field, know that it is not empty. It is full of potential. Know that. The quiet is not the end. It is the pause that allows life to return with grace. And as the snow begins to melt, as the first drip echoes from a branch, as water touches earth again, you will feel it, the soil turning, the microbes waking, the seeds remembering. You will feel it in the breeze, the breath of nitrogen stirring once more. Close your eyes now, and imagine the world not asleep, but dreaming of green, of growth, of the next phase in a never-ending rhythm. And just before the thaw fully comes, you might wonder, what wakes first, the soil, the seed, or the story that never truly slept? Close your eyes and drift backward, far beyond the memory of trees, beyond rivers and roots and the soft breath of animals, back to when the earth was raw and restless, a world shaped more by fire than by leaf. The first nitrogen did not bloom in gardens. It rose from deep within the earth's belly. Volcanoes, great stone lungs, exhaled it, not in quiet sighs, but in eruptions, roaring plumes of molten thought. Nitrogen burst into the sky with every surge, riding on the backs of gases and ash, released from the Earth's interior into an atmosphere still learning its rhythm. You might not think of volcanoes as givers of life. They seem like destroyers, cracking land, covering forests, turning day to ash. But even destruction has its secret purpose. Volcanic ash, once cooled and settled, is not lifeless. It is rich, dark with potential. It carries the bones of future ecosystems, laced with minerals, and the whisper of nitrogen. From that dust, soil begins, and in soil, life finds footing. You might picture it, a still, smoking plain of cooled lava, cracked and barren at first glance. But over time, wind brings seeds, rain shapes channels, and microbes, patient as time, begin their quiet work. They find nitrogen tucked into the ash, and slowly they weave it into forms that roots can drink. Fire becomes food, eruption becomes growth. In places where lava once poured, forests now stretch their arms skyward. The nitrogen released by ancient flames flows through leaves and sap, through bird and bear. Through you, that there are places on earth, like the islands of Hawaii or the slopes of Mount Etna, where the soil is still young, volcanic, alive with possibility. These places grow things richly, lush and wild, Because the ash beneath holds the memory of flame. And the nitrogen from those early eruptions. It still cycles, still breathes through ecosystems, still dances in rain clouds and rivers. Not all of it came from volcanoes. Some arrived on the wind. Some was born in the sky by lightning's spark. But volcanoes offered the first long exhale, a beginning. You may think of nitrogen as quiet, but its birth was anything but. It rose with heat, with the trembling of stone, with fire licking the sky. And even now, volcanoes continue to release it. Deep in the ocean, hydrothermal vents pour mineral-rich water into the black, pressurized dark. There strange creatures thrive, their lives bound by chemistry, not sunlight. These ecosystems depend not on photosynthesis, but on nitrogen and sulfur and methane, all brought forth from Earth's ancient heat. Even in the coldest, darkest places, the cycle continues. And so you see, nitrogen's journey didn't begin in a field of wheat or in a forest of oaks. It began in a furnace. It began with the earth speaking through pressure, through rupture, through flame. But from that flame came fertility. From chaos, order. It's a strange comfort, isn't it, to know that life's most essential elements can rise from destruction, that even the most violent forces can lay the foundation for gentleness, for green leaves, for a sleeping seed. As you rest tonight, imagine the earth in its earliest breath, fiery, molten, and generous. Its gifts were wrapped in heat and ash, but inside, they carried the code for life, and one of those gifts, rising silently through your bloodstream, now is nitrogen older than oceans, older than forests, born from fire. You carry the echo of volcanoes in your veins, and if nitrogen could speak, it might remind you, even fire has its place in the balance. Even destruction feeds the future. Even the dust, when cooled, remembers how to bloom. So lie still now, and as your thoughts drift like ash upon the wind, ask yourself, where else does creation begin, quietly, beneath the surface, waiting for its moment to rise? A seed is not just a beginning. It is a record, a memory, a story whispered through generations. You hold one between your fingers, light as a sigh, smooth as sleep-warmed stone. It carries the quiet weight of time, not in years, but in cycles, in rhythms of growth and return. Inside this seed, nitrogen waits, not in bulk or abundance, but tucked in molecules, stitched into proteins, held like breath within the embryo of life. This nitrogen once drifted freely, part of the sky you walk beneath. It floated in air, invisible and still, until a root, a microbe, a pulse of life pulled it downward, into the soil, into form. That journey, air to earth, root to leaf, flower to seed, is what the seed remembers. And now, in this resting state, it carries instructions. Instructions, not just for shape, leaf count, or stem strength, but for function, for chemistry, for reaching into soil and asking the earth for its breath again. The seed knows what to do. It doesn't think, but it remembers. Its memory is cellular, encoded, quiet, precise. You may not hear it, but it listens for cues. A shift in moisture, a softening of light, the warmth of a passing season. Then it wakes, and when it does, it begins to unfold. The husk parts. A root slips downward, thin, pale, determined. A shoot nudges upward, not yet green, but dreaming of it. And where does it turn first? Toward nitrogen, not by name, not with knowing, but by need. By the hunger passed down in silence. The sprout sends chemical whispers into the soil, messages shaped like questions. Are you there? Will you come? Can I begin? And the soil answers, if it can. If the cycle has been kind, if the microbes still stir, if the air has fed the ground well. If not, the seed struggles. Not all memory can become motion. Not all hope finds a foothold. This is where you enter, because seeds do not just rely on nature, they rely on choice, on care, on patience from those who scatter them. You are part of their cycle. The nitrogen in your own body once fed a plant that fed another that fed you. Now you bend and bury a seed, returning the favor, and perhaps some part of you recognizes this rhythm. It is older than civilization, older than cities or stories. It is a contract made not with words, but with seasons, in every field. Every garden, every wild patch of green, seeds sleep in soil. Waiting their dormancy is not laziness, it is trust. Trust that the world will be ready again, and nitrogen is their test. Their signal, their promise that the loop still holds. So when you next hold a seed, a bean, a grain, a fruit pit in your palm, remember what lies inside, not just a plant, but a pattern. Not just potential, but memory, and that memory includes you. Your breath, your steps, the food you eat, the hands you use to dig and press and water. You are already inside the seed story. It grows with your shadow across the soil. It listens for your return, and as its first root reaches downward, groping toward invisible nutrients, you might ask yourself, what else have I forgotten that something so small still remembers? There is something ancient in your fingertips as they press into the soil. You are not inventing a new path. You are remembering one. Before synthetic fertilizers, before deep machines tore through root and worm, there were quiet rhythms, hands, sowing seeds with intention, fields resting beneath winter snow, nutrients returned through ash, through rot, through reverence. Now, in fields across the world, the old ways stir again. Cover crops bloom where bare earth once baked in sun. Legumes with delicate roots draw nitrogen from air and feed the soil. Gently, quietly, as they grow. These plants do not feed you directly, they feed the future. Their roots loosen hardened ground. Their leaves fall and become nourishment. Their presence invites worms, fungi, and unseen allies back to the table. You begin to see compost differently. No longer just a heap of peelings and stems, but a slow alchemy, a transformation of leftovers into promise. Within it, nitrogen dances from decay to life again. A banana peel, a wilted leaf, a crushed eggshell, all whispering, I am not done, I will return. You spread this mix on your soil not as waste, but as an offering. Farmers kneel again, not always in prayer, but in observation. Their fingers test moisture. Their eyes scan for earthworms. They wait before tilling, watching the signs the land gives. They measure with instinct what once required only spreadsheets. These are not steps backward. They are movements deeper into the pulse of things. You learn about no-till farming. It sounds simple, but it is a shift in mindset. You leave roots in place, letting them decompose in peace, letting microbes feast, letting mycorrhizal fungi extend, their threads undisturbed. Each stalk left behind is a doorway into the underground, where nitrogen rests and waits to be reused. There is patience here. A season's gain is not measured in abundance alone, but in what is left for the next. The land becomes a partner again, not a machine. And nitrogen, that restless element, flows with respect through the layers, from air to leaf, from root to soil, from rot to rebirth. You listen to the new voices in agriculture, voices that speak softly, but with conviction, indigenous wisdom that never forgot the slow ways. Agroecologists who see fields as ecosystems, not factories. Gardeners whose hands carry generations of knowledge. They remind you, when you move slowly, you move with the earth. In cities, rooftops grow green. Community plots share compost bins. Children learn to turn over soil and find wonder in a worm. Even in the smallest corners of concrete, the slow ways return. You realize this is not nostalgia, it is repair. A remembering that leads forward, not back. The soil responds, not with applause, but with resilience. It begins to hold water longer. It grows darker, richer. It begins to smell like life again. You kneel in your garden. The sun is low. Your fingers brush leaves, and you feel it. The subtle hum of nitrogen, not rushing, but arriving, settling where it is needed, carrying the memory of air and storm, now rooted in stillness. And as you rise, you wonder what else we have forgotten, what other cycles still wait for our return. You lie beneath a canopy of trees, watching the leaves sway in the slow rhythm of the afternoon wind. They flutter like murmured secrets, each one catching the light in a slightly different way. No voice emerges from them. No sound tells their story. And yet, you feel them speaking, not in words, but in colors, shapes, and stillness. Their language is older than any tongue you know. Each leaf, soft and wide, is a solar sail, catching sunlight, drawing it down into the dark threads of life below. But sunlight alone isn't enough. To turn that light into food, into strength, into breath for the world, the leaf must have nitrogen. It is the silent grammar in the sentence of photosynthesis, a structure unseen, but absolutely necessary. You picture it now, nitrogen drifting through the soil in invisible rivers, wrapping itself around roots, climbing through the xylem like a message from the earth itself. It doesn't shout, it doesn't hurry, it simply moves where balance allows, filling what is empty, feeding what is hungry. In every leaf, you see this quiet choreography. The green you gaze upon, that gentle, life-giving hue, is not just beauty, it is chemistry. Chlorophyll, rich with nitrogen, turns sunlight into energy, transforming the invisible into the essential. Without nitrogen, the leaf fades, yellowing, like a thought half forgotten, a word lost mid-sentence. But nitrogen is not free to all. It must be captured, transformed, made usable. And that is where the quiet alliance begins, between plant and microbe, root and bacteria, atmosphere and earth. Beneath your feet, in the hush of the soil, tiny organisms labor to convert nitrogen from the air into something roots can drink. This is the beginning of language, a whisper exchanged in the dark, the first breath of a conversation. When the leaf receives nitrogen, it becomes fluent. Its veins fill with purpose. Its surface stretches wide, eager for light. It speaks with growth, with vibrant green, with the way it cools the air and shelters the life beneath it. Its silence is not emptiness. It is full of meaning, if only you learn how to listen. You notice how the leaves curl slightly when thirsty, how they droop at dusk, how they shimmer differently in midsummer than they do in early spring. Each gesture is a sentence, each shift a subtle inflection, and though they never form a word, their meaning is clear. They respond to balance, to what is given and what is withheld. In this quiet forest, you begin to wonder about your own languages, not just the words you speak aloud, but the ways your body whispers its needs through tired eyes, tense shoulders, a held breath, the way your mind responds to nourishment, to rest, to kindness. Like the leaves, you are shaped by unseen nutrients. What do you need more of? What makes you fade or thrive? Breathe in, the air smells green, sharp with oxygen and the faint sweetness of living things. You realize it's the leaves that have made this breath for you, converting sunlight and nitrogen into something you can inhale. They ask for nothing in return. They are fluent in giving. A breeze picks up, brushing your skin like the stroke of a page turning. The leaves above you respond instantly, fluttering in waves, like a conversation continuing across miles. You think of forests communicating through mycelial networks, warning each other of drought or disease. You imagine nitrogen flowing not just as a nutrient, but as a signal, a thread tying one life form to another in quiet. Understanding, balance. That's the message that keeps echoing back to you. Not more, not faster, just enough. The leaves do not hoard. They do not rush. They receive what they need, and they give what they can. In that way, they teach you a new kind of fluency, one rooted in stillness, in connection, in trust. As twilight edges in, the green of the leaves deepens into something dusk. The chlorophyll rests. The day's photosynthesis slows, and yet, even in this fading light, the leaves remain open, still listening to the air, still waiting for the next silent message from root to sky. You close your eyes and imagine your breath traveling back to the trees, rich with the carbon dioxide they will use at sunrise. It's a slow exchange, a conversation centuries old, unfolding in every inhale and exhale. You are not outside of it. You are a participant, a speaker in this wordless dialogue. As night begins to settle, you wonder what other silent languages exist all around you. If nitrogen is the speech of leaves, what do the roots say? What stories live in water, in wind, in the shifting of clouds? Overhead, and just as that thought begins to take shape, you hear a rustle from beneath the soil, as if something else is waiting to be heard, something ancient and unseen, something preparing to rise, quietly, into the roots. You kneel down and press your fingertips to the soil. It feels cool and steady beneath your skin, not empty but full, like a book with its cover closed. You don't need to dig far to find a story. Just a handful of earth contains centuries, of falling rain, of roots spreading and dying, of creatures living and decaying, of atoms moving slowly through cycles unseen. The soil beneath you is more than a surface. It is a living archive. It remembers every leaf that has fallen, every seed that has sprouted, every drop of nitrogen that has journeyed from sky to cell. The ground holds the memory of it all. In its quiet darkness, it writes everything down, not in ink, but in chemical change, in slow decomposition, in the layering of life upon life. You notice how the topsoil is darker than the layers below, rich, crumbly, almost sweet-smelling. This is humus, the residue of things that once lived and have now become something else. leaves, roots, insects, all broken down, blended, and softened into a new language. This is where nitrogen rests, nestled into complex compounds, waiting to be taken up again, waiting to speak through a leaf or a fruit or a breath. The soil is slow, but not silent. It hums with unseen activity, a community of organisms, smaller than sight. Fungi weaving their threads through root tips. Bacteria transforming nitrogen into forms that can nourish. Tiny arthropods stirring the earth like pages in a journal. Every movement here is purposeful, ancient, and part of the memory keeping. And you, your footsteps, are recorded too. Not just the weight of your presence, but your choices, your care, your neglect, the nutrients you add or take, the plants you grow or forget, the way you walk on this earth, all leave traces. The soil doesn't judge, but it doesn't forget. It reflects what you give and what you take. You lift a clump of earth in your hand and crumble it. Between your fingers are molecules that once belonged to dinosaurs, to ancient forests, to early oceans. The nitrogen here may have danced through the body of a fish, then been locked in stone, then loosened by wind, and finally returned to this place beneath your feet. Every atom tells a long story. Soil is where those stories come home. You pause and breathe in the scent, earthy, grounding, familiar. That smell is not just dirt, it is memory released, a microbial signature of life in transformation. It connects you, quietly, to everything that has come before and everything still to grow. In some traditions, soil is sacred, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, not as an ending, but as a return. A reminder that you belong to a cycle that does not end with death, but with reintegration. The nitrogen in your body will one day return to the ground, just as it once rose from it. You are not apart from this process. You are part of its rhythm. As you trace the path of nitrogen from air to leaf to soil and back again, you begin to see the ground not as static, but as a flowing archive, a mirror of life's patience. It reflects what is given time to break down and what resists decay. It holds both nourishment and warning. In times of abundance, the soil flourishes, airy, full of life. In times of imbalance, too much fertilizer, too little organic matter, the soil hardens, silences, forgets how to breathe. It is not invincible. Like memory, it can fade if not tended. Like a mirror, it can crack if handled carelessly. You begin to wonder, what does the soil beneath you say about this moment in time? What will it remember of us, our industry, our hunger, our hurried footsteps? What stories will it carry forward to the roots that come next? The light softens and shadows stretch across the ground. The soil cools, resting for the night. But even now, in the dark, its work continues. Microbes stir, decomposers hum, and nitrogen shifts one step closer to becoming breath again. Nothing here truly sleeps. You lie back and feel the weight of your body gently sink into the earth's cushion. There is comfort in knowing that this ground has held countless forms of life before you, and it will hold countless more. It is not just beneath you, it is within you. You are made of what the soil has offered. The thought settles quietly into your mind. If the ground remembers all, perhaps it also holds the secrets of how things begin again after they have broken. The night is quiet. You lie still, your body soft in the dark, but inside you, something ancient moves. A quiet whisper passes through your lungs. A breath drawn in, a breath let go. Within that breath hides a fragment of sky. Nitrogen, you do not see it. You Do not feel it, but it passes through you like a memory older than thought. You are not just breathing. You are part of a cycle that began long before you were born. In the soil below, fields and forests, tiny creatures work tirelessly. Bacteria, hidden from sight, draw nitrogen from the air and tuck it into roots, turning gas into life. This is the first translation, invisible air into living form. Without them, nothing would grow. Not the grass, not the trees, not the food you eat. These silent alchemists of the earth perform the ritual endlessly, and when a leaf falls, when a body rests into the soil, they begin again, breaking down what once was alive, releasing nitrogen back into the cycle. A loop within a loop, a breath within the soil. You, too, are part of this. When you eat, the nitrogen in the grains and greens and meats becomes your muscle, your blood, your thought. The amino acids in your cells, the proteins in your skin, they are all stitched with nitrogen. You are woven from it, every part of you traced by this quiet element. It does not stay still. The nitrogen inside you was once in the sap of a tree, the feather of a bird, the breath of another human being 1,000 years ago. It moves without borders, drifting across time, carried by wind, soil, and water, only to settle in you now resting for a moment in your sleep. And when you breathe out, when your skin sheds, when your time here is done, it will move again, back into the air, back into the soil, back into the hands of the unseen, the fungi, the roots, the smallest of beings who carry the weight of the world. You are not separate from this. You are the cycle, a loop within a loop, a moment of stillness in a story that never ends. Outside, the leaves draw nitrogen into their veins, crafting it into green. Inside you, the same story unfolds in silence, a cellular memory of millions of years. No one controls it, no one commands it. The cycle simply is flowing, returning, holding. Even now, as you lie still and quiet, you are part of this silent journey. You are never alone. The very elements of your body are the echo of forests, of oceans, of stars. Perhaps this is what it means to belong, to be shaped by something so vast, yet so gentle. Something that never rushes, never ends. A system that forgets no one and loses nothing. And if you could trace the nitrogen in your bones, you would find it looping backward through the meal you had last night, to the soil that grew it too. The rainfall that fed that soil, to the air that brought the storm, and further still, to a time before cities, before language, before humans. Back to when the earth was young, and lightning split the sky, fixing nitrogen from the air in the very first act of biological possibility. Even the stars played a part. For before it reached the earth, before it kissed the roots, nitrogen was born in the hearts of stars, in furnaces so hot they stitched atoms together. And when those stars died, they scattered their gift into space, where Earth gathered it like seeds. So you see, you are not just alive, you are carried, held in a loop that stretches from the dust of ancient stars to the breath in your lungs. A loop that doesn't end when you sleep. It continues, slow, sure, endless. And in this, there is peace. Because nothing is lost, nothing is wasted. The leaf returns to soil, the breath returns to sky, and you, even you, are returned to the story again and again. The cycle holds you, softly, faithfully, without ever needing thanks, and as you begin to drift, as your mind grows soft and wide like a quiet field, you can almost feel it. The way the world keeps moving, even as you lie still. The soil does not stop. The air does not forget. You are part of something vast and breathing, and somewhere in the stillness of this night, as the cycle cradles you, another question flickers. Gently in the dark, if everything returns, softly and without end, then what does it truly mean to be gone?